I'm Emily, and I'm a level 1 chef.
I'm Lorenzo, and I'm a level 2 chef.
I'm Frank, and I've been a professional chef for 23 years.
I last made this hamburger recipe probably about 2 weeks ago.
I actually just made this cheeseburger a couple days ago.
This is the burger I make for my family and friends, the people that are most important to me.
When I make burgers, I just use store-bought ground beef. Here we go.
This is grass-fed ground chuck. It's about 80 lean meat and 20 fat. The fat is your golden ticket to a good burger.
For my hamburgers, I like to use beef short ribs. It's got a great amount of lean meat to fat. The only problem with it is it's tough. So what we have to do is grind it. I like to grind my own meat because when you go to the supermarket, basically they're just getting whatever beef scraps they have. This way, I get a burger that I know exactly what's in it.
Now I'm just gonna put some breadcrumbs in. It holds it together, I think, a little better. Next up, some Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, pepper, salt, chili flakes, because my husband likes everything spicy.
Now that my meat is ground up, I'm gonna form it into patties.
You really just shouldn't handle the meat too long.
I disagree with that.
Fudge.
I like to work it a little so the burger stays together, holds its shape. What I usually do is I work it until it'll kind of stick to my hand.
I'm just gonna kind of like roll these up and then flatten them like hockey pucks.
Then I do the old divot, little dimple in the middle.
I work it into a volcano shape. What this is gonna happen is that when the meat cooks, it's gonna expand a little. This is actually gonna disappear and even out and make a nice flat burger.
Now we're ready to cook some burgers.
I cook the burgers in a cast iron pan. Cast iron pan holds a lot of heat.
I'm using a non-stick fry pan.
Skillet, griddle, flat iron. What I'm doing is cooking bacon. Why? I'm having a bacon cheeseburger.
So when I cook these, I don't really need that much pink inside, just a little bit of pink. That ground meat doesn't really have a great texture when you cook it rare.
I like it medium rare.
I season my burgers with salt.
Salt it right before you cook it.
What happens when you season ahead, salt draws out the moisture.
You want a moist burger.
When I season liberally. It's gonna help that crust form. I have a little beef fat, so I'm gonna take a little bit of fat and just coat the bottom of my pan.
I'll also use the delicious rendered fat from the bacon to cook my burger. Ooh. I'm gonna take these off. You sit over there.
The reason I use beef fat and not something like butter, with a pan this hot, I'm gonna put my butter in the pan and immediately the butter is gonna burn.
Ooh, I might have burnt that butter a little. I think it's fine.
Now I have my patty, I have my volcano in the middle, I'm gonna put the flat side down first.
So I'm gonna give it about 4 minutes on each side.
And when I see the lower portion of that burger get dark, crispy brown, flip over.
I'm gonna go as high as I possibly can to start that browning and the crust on the bottom. People tend to start moving things around. Leave the burger alone.
I'm just pressing down on it to make sure that all the meat touches the pan at least a little bit.
Do not press the juices out of this delicious burger, please.
I want a little bit of onion flavor on my burger. I take a nice slice of onion, I'm gonna put it on top.
We're getting a lot of smoke, I'm not sure why.
So I can see that it's nice and crispy. So I'm gonna do the old flip. Oh, it looks good, you guys.
My burger's brown on this side, I'm gonna give it a flip. So you can see, I have a beautiful crust.
Here we go, wait, there you go. Ah, oh, it's very charred. Good. This looks disgusting. Oh no, that's worse. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. Oh, good, the other side's nice and charry too.
There's a nice, crisp outer layer that's been formed. It's sealing the juices in this burger, and I'm waiting about 3 minutes.
So now my onion on the other side is getting caramelized. Caramelization is when the sugars start to go brown. The way that I'm gonna test this burger for doneness is I'm actually gonna poke at it, right? If I poke at it now, it's still really soft, and I want it to be fairly firm.
I'm gonna go ahead and put the cheese on this side because at least it's a little less charred. This is American cheese, so that'll melt nicely.
Today I'm using sliced cheddar cheese. Basically, this is when you get your camera out and you start taking pictures of your burger.
For this burger, I'm gonna use some Munster cheese. Now, Munster has a lot of the same melting qualities as American cheese, but it also has a little bit more flavor. I'm gonna let the Munster melt.
My burger is being hugged by my cheese. So let's set this delicious burger. Oh my Lord, have mercy.
So now my cheese is melted. It's not melted totally, but it's gonna continue to cook as I take it out of the pan.
I'm gonna take this off and just check the doneness real quick. If one were to eat this, it would be a little raw in the middle. That burger was burnt on the outside and raw on the inside, so we're gonna go again. I'm turning this on, much less hot than before. Butter, burger. Yeah, I think that's a cooked burger.
And now we're gonna get abundance and toppings and finish this burger.
I have a Kaiser roll today. I'm gonna butter it a little bit. I'm actually just toasting this in the griddle.
So I have just a normal white grocery store bun, a hamburger bun.
I like a potato roll. The bun doesn't need any extra fat. The burger has enough for it. Toast it plain.
Now we've got a nicely toasted Kaiser roll. Delicious.
Now we're gonna work on our toppings for the burger.
First off, I have some ketchup. I just like a little bit of moisture underneath the burger. Put a little mayo.
Hello.
All right, so we have mustard on the top. I usually do 3 dill pickle slices.
Fantastic.
As a chef, I like to make my own pickles. I have a fancy French mandolin. This gives the pickles a nice crinkled cut. And we just want to make enough to fill up our jar. Some sprigs of dill, I'm just gonna stuff them into the bottom of the jar. I have a little bit of garlic, add a couple of cloves, and then my spices. Coriander seed, black peppercorns, mustard seed, some little Thai bird chilies. And then I proceed to stuff my cucumbers in. And now I'm gonna take the brine that I made. I get a ladle, and I just fill it with the ladle. And there you go. Put my lid on, it goes right in the fridge. I leave it in the fridge for about a week. I have my burger patty, I'm gonna put it on my bun. I have the pickles that I made.
Bib lettuce.
That's a nice slice of lettuce right there.
Tomatoes.
I only like a few pieces of raw onion.
I kind of like a lot of it. Oh boy. My bacon. That looks good. And then some ketchup.
Not a ton. I just want enough so that it adds a little sweetness to my burger.
I'm just gonna press it all together. Bam.
Boom.
Beautiful.
It looks good.
It smells fantastic.
What I like most about this burger is it's not complicated. And now for the best part, I get to eat it.
Oh my lord.
It's just delicious.
We have 3 different chefs and 3 very different cheeseburgers, from the bun, the beef, and the toppings. But let's talk about the ground beef first. Emily, our first chef, used ground hamburger. Ground hamburger doesn't tell you a whole lot about the beef that you're using.
So this is just the beef that was at the grocery store?
Ground hamburger comes from any skeletal muscular tissue. You won't know specifically where that meat is coming from.
All right.
Lorenzo used ground chuck.
Grass-fed ground chuck.
The ground chuck comes from a really particular part of the animal. It's near the shoulder area. Ground chuck is 80% lean and 20% fat. It's gonna make for a nice juicy and flavorful hamburger.
It's like summertime in a bun.
Frank ground his own meat from the short rib, and it also has quite a bit of fat in it.
So if it gets stuck, you just push it through a little.
When you grind your own meat, you have more control over it as well. You can see exactly how much fat is going into your hamburger,
It has a beautiful amount of marbling.
and you can make sure that you're controlling the protein to lipid ratio.
I get a burger that I know exactly what's in it.
Handling and shaping of your ground beef makes a difference too. Emily added a lot of spices to her ground hamburger. She also added breadcrumbs. The spices are there to add a lot of different flavors. The breadcrumbs are gonna alter the texture a little bit.
I don't know if that's right, but that's what I do.
I would call that more of a meatball than a hamburger.
We're not making meatballs.
Lorenzo believed, as many people do, that you shouldn't overwork your patty.
Everyone has a body temperature, and that heat from your body melts the fat.
You can overwork your meat, but it's a little bit hard to do by hand when you're making a hamburger.
Oh, okay.
Lorenzo made an indentation in his patty, and Frank made a little volcano. He changed the shape completely.
I want there to be a divot in the center.
This is going to modulate the water loss that happens when you start to add heat to your patty. You start to have some steam inside, and that will raise or give a little bit of a puff to the patty, especially when you cook it at a very high temperature. Frank and Lorenzo both salted their patty prior to cooking. You don't want to salt your ground beef when you're mixing it.
No, you're absolutely right.
Salt can change the structure of the proteins and add some tough quality to your burger. It's important to do it just prior to putting the hamburger patty on the grill.
Salt it right before you cook it.
Emily used butter to cook her hamburger patty. This gives some really nice flavors,
I don't know, who doesn't like butter?
but it also has a really low smoke point.
Ooh, I might have burnt that butter a little. I think it's fine.
As you add the butter and turn up the heat, you're gonna burn the butter, and you're gonna get these off pyrazines and other types of compounds that are gonna give a burnt and bitter kind of taste.
I'm sorry.
Lorenzo used rendered pork fat,
Nice little fat rendering from here, which we will use.
and this adds a really nice, rich quality and a new flavor profile to your beef.
Yum.
Frank used rendered beef fat, which is a lot of really nice long chain fatty acids like stearic acid.
It doesn't hurt to cook beef in beef fat. It makes it taste better.
When you heat the stearic acid, it's going to melt, and you baste the burger in that fat, it's going to just re-add that delicious, unique stearic acid quality that you get only from ground beef. Emily used a non-stick frying pan. She really didn't need to. There's enough fat in the hamburger patty, it will be very easy to release from the pan.
I've had a lot of things stick to pans over the years. Here we are.
Lorenzo used a griddle, so he had a lot of contact with the hamburger patty.
It actually looks really good.
You're going to want conduction to happen. That can only happen when the patty has maximum contact with the heat source. Frank used a shallow cast iron skillet.
Cast iron pan holds a lot of heat.
So he not only had the conduction from the bottom of the cast iron skillet making contact with his patty, but he also had the advantage of the heat being retained because there were sides to that skillet. So he had a nice heat flow around his burger. When you cook ground beef, the proteins that are present are going to coagulate and they're going to squeeze a lot of the natural water that's present in the beef out of the protein matrix. When you have 20% lipid content, you won't lose the fat and it'll make for a really nice juicy cheeseburger. You generally want a nice high heat to get a good sear on your meat, and that's going to impart some really nice roasted, caramely, earthy, oniony flavors, and that's from Maillard browning. Maillard browning is a non-enzymatic browning reaction that happens between proteins and reducing sugars. You'll know your hamburger is done in a couple different ways. Emily cut hers open.
If one were to eat this, it would be a little raw in the middle.
You generally want to avoid doing that. You're going to have a lot of the juices and the fat run out of that hamburger before you even get to enjoy it.
No!
Lorenzo timed his meat. This is okay if you have a really consistent product, but if you change the different meats that you use when you're making your hamburger patty, that can be variable too.
And I'm waiting about 3 minutes.
3 minutes on each side at a really high temperature for a relatively thin patty should do the trick. We also had Frank, who knows how to look and touch a hamburger and tell whether it's done or not.
My burger is starting to firm up.
This is something that comes only from experience.
Okay, we're good to go with this.
Emily used American cheese. You're always going to know that American cheese melts really well, but it doesn't have a whole lot of taste.
I like American cheese because it's cheap.
Lorenzo used cheddar cheese.
To make it look the old-fashioned cheeseburger when you'd always see at a ballpark.
Cheddar cheese is going to give you a nice flavor profile. You're going to have a nice rich quality and a little bit of tang to that type of cheese. Frank used Munster. Munster also melts really well, and it gives you some really nice flavor profiles. It's the most complex out of the 3 cheeses that our chefs used. When you choose a cheese for your hamburger, you want to make sure that you consider water content. If you have a softer cheese, it's going to melt very easily. Cheeses that are a little bit harder are not going to melt very well because there's just not enough moisture. When choosing your bun, you have options. Emily used a standard white bun that you pick up in the grocery store. It was pretty much one-dimensional. Lorenzo used a Kaiser roll.
Delicious Kaiser roll.
We have a little bit of texture on the outside of the Kaiser roll. He also toasted his bun and used butter. Butter is a really nice flavor that complements some of the toasted chemicals and compounds that happen when you toast your bread. Frank just toasted his roll. It was a potato roll, so it had a nice rich quality to it. He did not put any kind of additional fat with his roll because there's plenty of fat in his ground short ribs. When it comes to toppings, you have a few things to consider. Texture,
I'm gonna do a little bit of raw onion.
color,
Fresh tomatoes.
and taste.
The pickles are going to add a contrast to your burger.
It's talking to me. One more bite, please.
The next time you make a cheeseburger, I hope you can take some of these elements